So if you're in IT, you've definitely seen the headlines. The big outages at AWS and Azure. And the chatter online is, well, it's loud. The cloud is just not reliable. But is that really a conclusion based on data, or is it more of a gut reaction? Let's dig in and separate the facts from the noise.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start by talking about a common mental trap we all fall into. Then, we'll introduce a really cool metric to compare providers objectively. After that, we'll look at the alternatives, go beyond just simple uptime, and wrap it all up with a concrete strategy you can actually use. First things first, we need to set the stage for this conversation. It's super easy to have an emotional reaction when a big service goes down, but making a strategic call, that requires a clear, logical framework. I love this quote. It's a great reminder that anything built by people, well, it's going to have flaws. So if our standard is it can never, ever fail, we're going to be disappointed every single time. Every system, whether it's in the cloud or in your own server room, is going to have issues. The real question isn't if it will fail, but which option gives you the most resilience for your money. And that leads us straight into a classic logical trap called the Nirvana Fallacy. Basically, it's when we look at a perfectly good real-world solution and say, nope, not good enough, because we're comparing it to some imaginary, flawless alternative that doesn't actually exist. So instead of chasing this impossible dream of a perfect system, our goal has to be choosing the best realistic option we have based on cold, hard evidence. So to do that, we need a way to measure availability that isn't just about feelings or headlines. We need a number. So for this analysis, we've created a metric we're calling the BlastRadius-KPI. And how we calculate it is totally transparent. We looked at every major incident since 2020 and figured out how long it lasted. Then, we looked at how many services, how many customers, and even how much of the rest of the internet was affected. And we gave it a severity score from 1 to 5. The final KPI is just that severity score multiplied by the hours the outage lasted. It's a simple but really powerful way to measure the total impact, the blast radius of any given disruption. So, what does the data actually tell us? Well, since 2020, Google Cloud has the lowest score at 98. Azure is next at 136, and AWS is at 225. But here is the most important part of this whole thing. This KPI is per capita. It's not about how big the provider is, it's about the impact on their actual customers. So yeah, AWS is the biggest, but this data shows their outages have also had the largest cumulative impact on their users. Okay, so that's how the big three stack up against each other. But you're probably wondering, what about the other choices, right? Let's bring on-prem and the smaller regional cloud providers into the mix. The idea of a rock-solid in-house data center sounds great, but the data, it tells a bit of a different story. A recent study found that 57% of employees feel like IT disruptions are actually getting worse. A third of them see issues every single week. And if you've ever had to carry a pager for an on-prem system, I'm guessing you're nodding your head right now. And here's why that happens. Look at this. Power supply issues cause more than half of all data center outages. Cooling is another 13%. We're talking about the absolute basics, keeping the lights on and the servers from melting. These are the exact kinds of fundamental infrastructure problems that hyperscalers have mastered at a massive industrial scale. It's just incredibly difficult to replicate that yourself.
Okay, so what about those mid-size providers? Now, you have to give some of them, like Ionos and Scaleway, a lot of credit for being very transparent. But when you look at their blast radius KPIs, whoa, the scores are in the hundreds, the thousands, even tens of thousands. The data really couldn't be clearer. When it comes to just pure availability, the hyperscalers are just playing a different game.
But look, uptime is only one piece of this puzzle. A solid IT strategy has to protect confidentiality and integrity too. And honestly, when we start talking about these pillars of security, the gap between the cloud and on-prem gets even bigger. Just think about the race to patch a new vulnerability. Hyperscalers are often patching their own infrastructure before the public even knows there's a problem. Their customers can then roll out automated patches in days. Meanwhile, in the on-prem world, you're lucky if you're patched in weeks. It's often months. And if you're responsible for the budget, this is absolutely crucial. Patching faster directly lowers your risk, and that has a very real, very positive impact on your total cost of ownership.
And what about just knowing if your systems are configured correctly? It's the same story. In the cloud, everything has an API. That means you can do real-time audits with tools that are often built in and free. Trying to get that same level of insight on-prem, you're looking at buying expensive, specialized tools that are a pain to set up and are usually full of blind spots. So, after looking at all this evidence, what does it actually mean for your strategy? Let's tie it all together into a direct, actionable recommendation for you. Look, choosing a hyperscaler is not just about following a trend. When you look at the hard data for availability, the speed of security patching, and the ability to see and manage your configurations, the conclusion is pretty much unavoidable. For your most important business-critical applications, hyperscalers are the most secure and resilient option. So what do you do now? Here's your checklist. First, take a hard look at where your workloads are, but use objective metrics like the BlastRadius-KPI, not just gut feelings from the latest headline. Second, make sure your most critical workloads are on hyperscalers. Third, when you're calculating the TCO, you have to factor in the massive risk reduction you get from their security advantages. And finally, if you still decide to put a critical service somewhere else, the question you have to ask your team is this: what is our business justification for knowingly taking on this higher level of risk?